As the effort to sell JEA began to collapse under the weight of scandal, a city council committee was formed to ask questions. Now known by the names of its co-chairs, the Diamond Salem hearing played an integral role in exposing and snuffing out a plan that ultimately resulted in a criminal prosecution. I'm joined now by City Council President Ron Salem. Welcome.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, and we welcome you to join our conversation as well. You can reach out via social media. You can give us a call at 904-549-2937, or you can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. President Salem, the former head of JEA, Aaron Zahn, was convicted earlier this month of conspiracy and wire fraud in his attempt to profit from the sale of JEA. His colleague, Ryan Wanamaker, the CFO, was acquitted. Is that outcome satisfying for you personally? Is it satisfying for the city?
It is to me, because clearly through all my investigations and my time on the council, I always thought that Aaron Zahn was the ringmaker, and there were several people, his lieutenants, for lack of a better term, that were involved as well. Ryan Wanamaker happened to be the one that was indicted, but it did not surprise me that he got off.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of Zahn's conviction, did you see that coming? Was that something that you thought would happen?
And as you remember seeing me in the courtroom, I was over there several days during the trial. It was important to me to watch it and feel it because I had invested so much time into it. And I thought the prosecution did an excellent job of presenting the case. So it was no surprise to me that he was convicted.
So the Diamond Salem hearing was in late 2019 in December, and it was really the first public vetting of the planned benefit scheme that was created by JEA executives, and that was ultimately the core of that criminal case. That happened, as public outrage was really starting to boil over. Let's hear a little from how your colleague Rory Diamond introduced it.
During the course of the ITM process, JEA has encountered a series of public relations problems, undermining its credibility and the necessity of the ITM process. In particular, JEA's entertaining of a long-term performance unit plan, a PUP plan, sparked a degree of outrage unique in our community's history.
How consequential did you feel that meeting was at the time, and what kind of response have you gotten since from people who investigated this case or prosecuted this case?
Well, I got just a little bit of background on that hearing. Councilmember Diamond and I were asked by the administration at the time to conduct that hearing on the PUP. We had a notice meeting on that particular meeting occurred on a Monday. We had a notice meeting, I think, on the Tuesday before to decide how we were going to divide up the responsibility for that hearing. And we were told by JEA that we would have the documents the next day, which was Wednesday. On Friday of that week, we finally got the documents. It was 800 pages of documents, and because of the Sunshine Law, him and I could not talk. So we both individually spent the weekend, and I must have spent 12, 14 hours a day reading through those, writing down questions. And the comments that I got right after the hearing was how effective it was. In hindsight, we know that Mr. Zahn and Mr. Wanamaker lied to us several times. And it was really neat for me. I was asked to appear at the Garrity hearing that occurred a couple of months ago leading up to the trial.
Over the summer.
To document the fact that Mr. Wanamaker and Mr. Zahn were volunteers there. They weren't coerced to come there. And Mr. Tyson Duva, the prosecutor, indicated to me it was a central part of their case, was that hearing. And they showed clips several times during the hearing.
And
during the trial.
Remind us why that was so important and why prosecutors were showing excerpts from that meeting to jurors.
Because we were able to, through the documentation, just for example, going back to the infamous July 23rd board meeting, we were able to show that board members were did not get a review of the agenda. We were able to show that the PUP plan was in the last 10 minutes of that board meeting, and board members thought it was a $3.4 million plan versus hundreds of millions of dollars. We were able to show that Ryan Wanamaker did do calculations. I was getting texts during that hearing, I'll never forget it, of JEA employees telling me to ask Mr. Wanamaker about his whiteboard in his office, because apparently he had done calculations on his whiteboard and then erased them. So there was so many things that came out of that hearing that Tyson Duva was able to use in the prosecution.
Tyson Duva, of course, the lead prosecutor on that federal criminal case. So part of the presentation that Tyson Duva presented was not just the PUP as a get-rich scheme, but it was, he told the jury that the entire sale process was a fraud perpetrated on the public, on the city, on the council, and that it was orchestrated or at least enabled by other city leaders. Is that how you feel now? I mean, do you feel like it was a fraud from the very beginning?
Absolutely. I mean, I can remember the solar scenario that solar is going to be taking over and the JEA is not going to exist as it is today. And if we don't do something soon, we're going to lose the ability to sell this asset. There was so many things that we were told as the council that just were not true. And we've since have found out the people that watch the JEA, the other agencies that were looking at JEA, were wondering, why are these people saying this about JEA? Because it's a strong company and it's not going to go away. So we were misled. The council was misled. The public was misled from the very beginning.
So, I mean, help me think through if this, was a fraud from the beginning. How do you feel about the former mayor's role in appointing Aaron Zahn to the board, of essentially clearing the decks of the previous board, of, as we heard in testimony, ousting, being behind the ouster of the former CEO, Paul McElroy?
Well, clearly, Mayor Curry wanted JEA sold. There's no question about that. Aaron Zahn was a person that was going to perform that task and that job. He clearly wasn't qualified, and we have since learned all that, and never should have been in that role from the very beginning.
But, I mean, at the time, the mayor was saying he wasn't pursuing a sale.
Well, he said in his reelection that he would not introduce legislation to sell it. He never did, but the board moved in that direction right after that 2019 election. Was
that a conversation you were having with him? Like, was he talking to you or other city council members about a sale, or saying that I really do want a sale, even though publicly I'm saying I'm not going to support a sale?
I never had those kind of discussions with Mayor Curry myself. Just never came up.
Mm-hmm. So, and I just want to, at the time, Curry said that the JEA board, it was taking on, quote, very serious threats to the future of a government-owned utility. And he said that JEA had conducted the process openly and in accordance with the law. That was kind of when this was all blowing up, right around the time of the Diamond Salem hearing. Do you believe he believed that?
The problem that I saw began at that July board meeting. The board was misinformed on the condition of JEA. They didn't ask the questions they should have.
But do you think the mayor was misinformed about the state of JEA? Because he was repeating that.
He was repeating that. I assume he believed that. But we have since found out that that was not the case.
And so, insofar as, he had a role in inserting Aaron Zahn, placing him there, as you say, unqualified for the role, basically led the city down this path to scandal. Do you think that the mayor has done right by the community in terms of acknowledging that fact or atoning for that fact?
Well, I think the comments I've seen by the mayor is that he has said what he should have done is he should have taken this whole idea to an entity like the Civic Council very early on and vet it through that kind of process versus going immediately to JEA. And I think that would have been a better process.
Sure. But I mean, at the time that he was urging you all on the council to put your foot on the gas and hurry up and get this process through, was right at the same time the Civic Council was weighing in and saying, this is a terrible project. It is riddled with problems. The community has lost faith. We need to stop it. And he was pushing for acceleration.
Clearly, after the committee meeting where Kyle Billy released the PUP.
Kyle Billy being
the council auditor.
Council auditor.
Council auditor. I called it mind-boggling. It was the headline in the paper next day. we could see that that plan was unraveling the whole JEA sale, and you're correct. That's when the Atlanta meeting occurred, that the sale of the JEA was accelerated, and then days after the hearing that Councilmember Diamond and I conducted, the sale was canceled, Zahn and Wanamaker were terminated, and the whole thing stopped.
But you don't see Mayor Curry and shake your fist and say, man, this, I mean, really almost happened on our watch.
No, I mean, I think there were several. I blame Zahn and the team there for what happened. They misled everybody. They the ones that obviously are going to jail. It was just orchestrated that way.
But you don't think it was orchestrated that way by the mayor?
No, I do not.
Okay. We're talking about JEA. We're also going to talk about other city business before the city council. I am here with City Council President Ron Salem, and we invite you to join the conversation. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out on social media, and you can call us at 904-549-2937. So is this issue put to bed? Are you comfortable with where we are now with JEA?
Yeah, I think as a city and myself personally, I'm ready to finally close the book on this.
Mm-hmm.
That I feel like we finally have justice after 5 years. And the few of us that were first termers, now second termers that are still around, I finally feel like that as a city we can move forward.
And you feel like you've played a significant role in that?
Well, there were several of us that did. I feel like I did, and there were several on the council. Those that led the Special Investigative Committee should feel good about this. So there's a half dozen or so. Scott Wilson, who's now working for that set up the Special Investigative Committee under a lot of pressure not to. So there were a lot of heroes on the council, the auditors, et cetera, that should feel good about this outcome.
There has been some chatter on social media about there should be a movie made of this whole process.
I think a documentary of some sort should be done. No, it's just too interesting.
Yeah.
Not to.
Yeah. I want to talk to you, shift gears a little bit, and talk about a proposal for a new jail. So that's something that has been batted around for a long, long time, but you really have made it a centerpiece priority of your, presidency, and it really is moving ahead. So explain for people who may not understand why you've decided that now is the time to do this, and how do you address the fact that we're basically going to be looking at kind of $2 billion projects simultaneously between the stadium and what all estimates suggest a jail would probably cost?
Well, to go back a second, at my installation speech last June, I highlighted the jail and said that this was an issue that we had talked about in this community for years and nothing had happened, and I was going to move it forward. And I set up a special committee chaired by Michael Boylan, who's done an excellent job of moving that process. We've had all sorts of hearings, community meetings. We've gotten some great information. And you're right, what has excited me is now the jail is at the top of discussion. UNF did a poll, and a new jail was more popular than the stadium, which was just shocking to me. So
why do you suppose that is?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I was shocked by the result and as I go around town, people are now understanding when we talk about mental health and health care in the jail, people are now understanding that we have a facility that is not providing the kind of care that we should be providing in our jail, and it's become a topic of discussion. And as your listeners probably know, the sheriff is looking at vacating the police memorial building and moving that part of the operation to the Florida Blue building, which will be
in Riverside,
which will be a significant part of this. I think he'll be putting out an RFP in the near future to hire a consultant to look at locations, design, size, and all those things. So we need to do this. And I hear those that say we've got a stadium and a jail. Fortunately, the council, I think, was wise to put $10 million into the existing jail to make some repairs on elevators, electrical systems, which will buy us some time on the jail. so we're not moving both items at exactly the same time.
We've got a call. Charles on the west side. Good morning. Welcome to First Coast Connect.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hi, Ron. I was wondering if for the summer, has City Council allotted the funds and everything that's needed for the pools to be open for the kids this summer? You know, to be staffed with lifeguards and whatnot?
I know that's been a major emphasis of Mayor Deegan in her budget, was to make sure those pools are open and staffed. And I've talked to the parks director, and I don't think you're going to have the issues you had last summer, assuming we can, due to COVID and those things, get the parts and equipment that get to make sure the pools are open and working well.
Call also from Jim in Riverside. Good morning, Jim. Go ahead.
Hey there. I know we drifted a little off the JEA topic, but now I want to thank all the elected officials, public officials like the city auditor, and the journalists for really putting the brakes on selling our public utility twice, really, in the past 6 years. So now that we have saved it, what can we do with it? I know that JEA has been looking for a growth revenue stream for a while now. What would the councilman think about JEA becoming an internet service provider?
An internet service provider. I mean, that was kind of one of those, I think, maybe somewhat far-fetched, ideas that were put in the ITN as like a possibility, right? If there was a variety of things that JEA could get into that were not directly related to generating energy and selling water.
Well, one of the things that has come up through this discussion is our method of running our various authorities and the boards that are overseeing them. And as I've gone around town, it's critically important that those boards are very active, asking questions and truly managing those entities. I just made a JEA appointment of a reappointment of Rick Morales, and I have a second appointment as we speak that I'm interviewing candidates for. And one of the things that I do is to make sure they understand the importance of those positions. They don't understand something, ask the question, because the chances are if you don't understand it, somebody else does not. We never want to be in the situation we were with the JEA where I think board members were not as in tune as they should have been. And I don't mean to be critical of some of our citizens, but clearly that was an issue with JEA.
Have you gotten any sense from those former board members about how they feel about their time? I mean, many of them were called to testify. And as you saw, during that testimony, very often they're being asked to watch the video of themselves, making announcements and proclamations about how important this moment was. They all seemed to recognize it was a really important moment. They were deciding to possibly sell the city utility. And yet that care wasn't taken, as you say, to really delve into what was the consequences could be.
I think they feel misled like many of us were. They drank the Kool-Aid like many of us did in terms of believing that JEA was not going to be able to exist as it was. Could they have pursued it to a much higher degree? I think they could have. But I know many of them feel terrible about what happened. And I've heard from them, which is why as I interview board of directors for the port, the airport, JTA, I go through these same questions. We are counting on you as board of directors to manage these entities that are critical to Jacksonville. And if you're not capable of putting in the time and effort to ask the questions, please don't serve.
That's a daunting, task. And I would guess that anybody applying for those positions would look at what happened to the JEA board and really, almost quail. I mean, that's a lot to think about, that they might, on their watch, something like that consequential could happen.
Absolutely. And if they feel that way, don't serve.
Yeah.
I think there are enough people in this community willing to step up. We need to make sure they're the right people to step up.
We do have a listener email on the topic of JEA saying, Mr. Salem, it's obvious that for political reasons you're not implicating former Mayor Curry, but it's obvious he and his cronies were in cahoots to sell the JEA short-term gains to steal the JEA from the citizens of this community. Do you feel that that? Well, I guess what's your answer to that?
I mean, as I said, there's no question that Mayor Curry was pushing to sell JEA. I think that's pretty obvious, and pushed it till the very end, all the way into December with that Atlanta meeting and such.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what else you can say.
You don't believe, though, that he deserves any more blame than just saying, that he was duped.
Well, I've never seen any evidence, and I think it became clear that they were completely unaware of the pup as the rest of us were. And that's really what changed everything, was the release of the pup and the worth of that. There's been no evidence that I've seen anywhere that anyone has presented that the mayor's office knew anything about the pup before the council and the rest of us found out about it.
Sure.
Now, clearly, he continued to push the sale after the pup came out, and that's where I think at that point we should have stopped the whole process.
Right. Although back to kind of the presentation that we got from the prosecutor, it's, not just the pup that was the fraud. It was the entire process that was a fraud.
Absolutely. And we know more about that today than we did back in those days. We all believe that possibly JEA would not exist as it stands today with solar and all these other explanations.
Do you believe that this is forever a dead issue now?
I think so. I can't imagine anyone bringing this up again. And that's kind of the sad part. I mean, debating the sale of JEA could have been a reasonable topic to discuss. Obviously, it just turned very bad very quickly.
I want to turn back to the jail issue a little bit because I've heard some really interesting discussions. I know that people on those committees have visited other jails. There's a lot of input that they're getting from the mental health community, from the criminal justice community. Is there any discussion at all about the kind of incarceration rate of Duval County versus other counties in the state? It's very high.
I saw the article that I think David Bauerlein put out was strictly based on population. And what I don't know is how Jacksonville as an urban city compares to some of those other areas. It's an interesting statistic. We are housing somewhere around 3,000 inmates today. I think clearly we need to build a facility that can house at least that number as our population grows. We need to have better services for health care, an infirmary of some sort that we really don't have today, mental health. I've been at the forefront of our mental health offender program where we're diverting people out of the jail, providing them mental health services and getting them back into the community. All that needs to be considered, and we clearly need more of a campus-style facility versus the 6-story, 8-story building we have now.
Right, which is clearly not serving the need that it has. But is there any real conversation happening when we discuss, for instance, capacity of the jail that addresses whether there are other ways to divert or other ways to see that people are not warehoused there for long periods of time?
Well, clearly, I think we need to treat those with a mental health problem differently than the hardcore criminals. And I think everyone's in agreement with that. And we need an infirmary so that we're not, we are spending $6 million a year transporting inmates from the jail to UF Health.
Were you surprised to learn that?
I was shocked to learn it was that much. And of course, I initiated through our council auditors a study of UF Health. And as we found out, a third of the indigent care UF Health does is inmate care. So much of that could be performed in a jail if we had an appropriate infirmary and those kinds of things. There's tremendous dollars that can be saved through this process.
It's crazy when you think, we're paying for the transport of those inmates. We're also paying to some extent for some of that indigent care at that hospital. So we're kind of paying both ends.
And we're paying for security at the hospital. We've got to have a private guard outside the door 24/7 to guard that inmate.
I want to ask you on the issue of homelessness. So there's this new unfunded mandate that was actually, sponsored by a local legislator. The city's now going to have to pay for some sort of facility for homeless people. How do you anticipate funding that? How is it frustrating to you that that mandate's been handed to your council?
Well, this is one of the areas where I think there's some synergy between the mayor's office and the council. I set up a special committee on homelessness that's chaired by Joe Carlucci. That committee has identified a funding source, a permanent funding source for those services, and we are moving forward with a diversion program as well as a program to assist the chronic homeless. What the state legislature did recently is just going to accelerate that process. I met with Mayor Deegan yesterday. We discussed this briefly. I think right now everything's on the table in terms of how we meet that mandate, whether it's a school, a building. I'm a little leery of a tent city type program that I just don't think that will work very well. And it's not only the physical housing them, it's all the services you have to provide as well.
Which
So,
include
health care, mental health services, if you have to feed them, all those types of things. So it's quite an undertaking, particularly to have it in place by October 1.
what are you looking forward to now as your kind of the second half of your term as council president? What are your remaining priorities?
The stadium. That's probably the biggest item still on the agenda, is to get the stadium deal hopefully passed. If not, while I'm still president, soon thereafter. The Laura Street Trio is still out there. We're hoping to see that come back in a form that the council is comfortable with, and hopefully we can move that forward as well over the next 2 or 3 months.
Well, Council President Salem, thank you so much for being here today. I hope you come back and visit us again soon.
Thank you for having me, Ann.
Thanks for being here.